Well, hello. Hopefully, we got a few guys jumping on with us, and we're a little bit late. We've accommodated the Australian Wonder, but yet he's not here. So hopefully, he'll make it in a little bit. Uh, Tonight, we are gonna chat about controversial topic. Culling of armies. How many armies are too many? How would you call them? The reality is, many of us have been long in the tooth gamers, and we've been through this before. So it's not like we haven't seen how everybody else has done it. Before we get there, a couple things. I just got a Kickstarter in, maybe a month ago, that I had forgotten to share with you guys, and it's from a company called Game Envy. And Game Envy had first Kickstarter was to make these really cool plastic handles, and what they've done now is pallets and water cups. And so this is their water cup. I'm sorry, but what's really amazing about it is that it, if I can get it to, so it's a collapsible water cup, and it's actually pretty nice. And the really ridiculous part of this is that it doesn't fall over. Hey, there he is. I knew you weren't going to leave me all by my lonesome. Can you hear me all right? Oh, you can't hear me. Uh-oh. Well, we'll figure out your sound here in a minute. So the other thing that the Kickstarter had, and this is the real reason why we backed it, was they had a wet palette. And what's cool, I wish I had a top down thing, but what you can see is this is the top piece, and move this mic out of the way, back up a little bit. So, and what's cool about it is it's got a the ability to actually make it airtight, closing it off. But then on the top, there's room to store brushes, and there's a removable palette, which is kind of cool. And then the bottom of the palette. Now, this is my daughter's palette. She just started. We obviously haven't put any effort into it. She just put a little water on it. But what's amazing about it is I have been using mine, and they give you a little squeegee or a little piece of plastic to fold out the wrinkles. And what's amazing is I'm really impressed by the fact that there's no paint bleed through the paper into the sponge. So on my Stay Wet palette, where I was just using the cheap parchment paper, tons of paint bleed through. But so far, knock on wood, I haven't had any of that. So if you like this, you should check it out, GameEnvy.com. They've come in different colors. We got a black and a blue, but they have a green and a red as well. Let's see. So that's palette wise. I guess the other thing that I would share is that I'm going to Lone Wolf. I wasn't sure I was going to make Lone Wolf, but I'm happy to say that I am going to make Lone Wolf, and I figure why not share my list. So those of you, hopefully you guys can see this. It's very similar to the list I took to the past event where I won. The big difference is I managed to squeeze Hex into the list. Let's see if... Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you now.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get a backup option. I think this headset's playing up, so I'm going to try and get you on the iPad at the same time.
No problem. So
what are we looking at?
Oh, this is the list I'm taking to Lone Wolf. So
you dirty man.
Yeah, well, it's very similar to what we took before. 2 Red Goblin Scouts, 5 hordes of Siege Breakers, 1 Mammoth with the upgrade to the Big Deal, which that's sort of required by law. Ogre Warlock. I had Drain Life and I had Conjure Staff before. Now I've got Drain Life and Hex. I'm going to try to work Hex in and maybe defensively, see if I can stop some of the shenanigans. We'll see.
I was going to say, talk to me about that option. What have you seen that makes you feel like you want Hex?
Shadow Beasts. Shadow Beast has been a problem because if you throw it on Lady Ionia or Mikhail, you can take out a Siegebreaker horde.
Yeah.
Right. That's one. The other one, the other ones that I don't like, since I don't have any upgrades to any of my units, I don't really want to get Shattered Earth on me, right? Like I don't want to be hindered, or worse than that, have them hindered the Mammoth. The Mammoth hits on 4s, and so now hitting on 5s, no, not a good option. So that's what I was thinking, and really the cost to put that in there was lose the Conjure Staff and then lose the Blade of the Blade of Slaying. the 5-point magic item on one of the Berserker Braves. Still have the sergeant. I really thought hard about taking the sergeant out of the list, but I was like, yeah, at the end of the day, I need something that can reach out and touch somebody at range, and 30 inches is long enough.
Oh, who doesn't love reaching out and touching someone? Honestly,
exactly. And then Berserker Bullies with Namagraken. Hey, look at this! I'm gonna drop this off, and we got somebody special joining us. Can you hear us though? I don't know if he can hear us.
Yeah, can you hear me? My sound quality may be bad.
Yeah,
well,
mate,
hot damn, fresh off a tournament. Where'd you finish?
Sixth place.
Not bad. Out of how many people? 8?
16.
Nice.
16.
Nice. Yeah. That's not bad. Not bad. So you must have finished 2-1-1?
2-1, but with good losses and big win.
Nice. Good. Yeah. How's the scene developing? Is it and for those who don't know, we're talking about the Reno scene is where you participated this weekend.
Good. Some good lists. Some nice armies. So definitely a little bit more competitive. This was probably the most competitive of the events that they've had there so far. So maturing as you would.
Yeah, it's always interesting. We haven't had this conversation yet, but probably be a topic for our future podcast is when you're part of a small group and you're transitioning to a bigger group. That's always an interesting piece because, it's been my experience that some players that are really good in the small scene, sometimes they don't transition when you're bringing in a lot more heavy hitters into a bigger scene. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to navigate. It really is. So
I was super happy for Kyle Timberlake with his Foot Dwarves won the tournament.
Nice.
His first best overall. So super excited for him. Long time coming. Solid player. So was just so happy to see him win.
Well, fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, we know you're driving and it's probably unsafe to have you driving and stuff. So we'll let you get back to the road. It was nice
thanks
for you to chop in.
Thanks for introducing us to your friend up your right nostril as well.
Yes, I like the shades. It looks like he's like
joking,
on a Bass Pro boat, like Bass Pro fishing.
Oh, I appreciate it, and you can just suck it, Crocher.
Okay.
I'll see you guys later.
Well, Matt. So with all the preambles and shambles out of the way, you had threatened people. You told them we were going to chat about, the boogeyman topic.
And I had, and I'm expecting another dropout any minute while I'm just trying to get the logged in on another device.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna look at some of these comments. So interesting.
Yeah, can you see my Fanatics on the Fanatics too?
I do. I've got that up as well. So yeah, we put it up on Fanatics on the Counter Charge and on YouTube, and we really got a lot of great. We got a lot of great. Make sure I muted everything here. Sure did. So what I figure we could do is maybe start with some of the general comments. So obviously right here we've got Lazy Pirate Painting. He mentions that League of Rorty and Kingdoms of Men could be combined. And then obviously the Rat Slave list. I mean, nobody plays the Rat Slave list that I'm aware of. So, he brings up a couple good points. And let's go over to the Counter Charge page. So Danny Fanning makes a comment that says he thinks that they should align to what they sell. But he brings up a very good point. What's the right amount of armies? Is 27 enough? 20 not enough? Here's an interesting little tidbit. There are 24 armies in Age of Sigmar. 24 armies, right? There are 32 armies in 40K. However, in 40K, 12 of those armies are Space Marines. So, you could argue there's really just 20 distinct armies. I'm probably going to get some hate mail for that. I'm sure, Blood Angels and Imperial Guard or Imperial Fists are super distinct, but Nick's comment was, "Oh yeah, heads would roll." Yeah, I don't know. I've been through this several times. John Blakemore, wouldn't be surprised to see the number of master lists drop and most armies become themes. For example, only one master elf list, but have a good, neutral, and evil option, right? Which would be your regular elf, your Sylvan kin, and your Twilight kin. Same for dwarves, right? And men. Men could be the Basilean could be good. The Varangur could be evil. Kingdom's Men could be neutral, right? Let's see. Tim Cross, personally don't think anything needs to change. Personally would be annoyed for some armies to disappear, especially 100% agree with you, but the reality is that history is going to repeat itself. Like, I mean, Matt, maybe what's been your experience with game systems that have either consolidated list, invalidated units? Give me a sense of where you're coming from and how often that you've experienced that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever experienced truly, and this is totally theoretical, right? We don't know anything from Mantic about whether this will actually happen. But it would make sense, because what we've seen a move towards them wanting to do all the lists be mantified. Yep. And which I think is fair enough. And so I wouldn't say I've had lots of experience with it, but I think I just look at it and go, to me, this would make sense. And I think what we'll see is not necessarily, I think what would make sense is not necessarily deleting an army, but that it would be combined into an army by allowing some of the specialized units into whatever they create afterwards.
Yeah. Well, my experience, I played lots of different game systems, obviously the most notable being Warhammer Fantasy, and Warhammer Fantasy, I have had, I don't know how many armies have been I have lots of armies sitting in tubs over here that are invalidated. The worst probably was I had there's a couple worse ones. One of them is they had a when I guess it was 6th edition came out, they had a Ravening Hordes like packet that came out, and it just really ran roughshod. They were kind of like temporary armies until they figured out what they wanted in 6th edition. And yeah, things like Wood Elf Chariots didn't make the cut. So
yeah. So have you had, and so you've had, but is it whole armies being invalidated by changing
both
rules?
so they've also now one of the things that I like is the fact that the business model's different, right? So GW in the past has had supplements that came out and brought out a whole host of like special armies, like the Slayer army, where it's all dwarf slayers, right? But then once I think it's called Storm of Chaos, maybe I think it's what it's called. Once that went away and they decided that's it, then those armies are invalidated. So I think we're fortunate in the sense that we don't have a lot of yeah, I mean, it's not the same business model, right? Like they're not trying to write army books and army books and army books. But that being said, maybe this is a question we should tackle first. Why would somebody want to consolidate, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm also still trying to sort out this crap.
Well, why would you consolidate? I mean, the main reason would be balance, right? The more options you've got, the more armies you've got, the more you have to balance. Number two is if you're trying to actually support a game, at some point you're going to have so many SKUs, you're not going to be afforded the shelf space to accommodate all those things. So there's that. Hank Gooch has a comment. He doesn't think armies should be deleted, but just think they could make them more unique. The Wilt Father is a good example. I think they fixed a lot with the last change, Clash of Kings, but would like to see more unique units across the board. Dave Fanning said, I think if you try to combine armies no master list, you will either lose the flavor of these theme armies or make master lists have every option, and we end up with 10 with 10 undead level lists. I mean, that's maybe that's another question we should tackle is how would you go about invalidating or consolidating, right? One way you do it is you just you literally stop supporting the army. you just ignore it, right? Like I've seen that done with games like Dark Age, where they didn't officially kill anything. They just didn't put anything out for it. And eventually an army would get so far behind that it doesn't get anything new.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, cool. I'll just do this while the other headset's charging. I totally agree. You could do that. I think the main reason they would do it is to allow them to produce models for whole armies a bit better, because we've got to remember that Mantic is small. But I actually think it would also allow them to be more creative in rule writing, because you can come up with some funkier stuff that you don't have to test against 27 different combinations. So I actually think that by reducing the number of armies, you potentially end up with a more flavorful game.
Well, it seems counterintuitive, but I agree with you, right? People think that if you drop some armies, that the armies are going to become less distinct. I think it's exactly the opposite. Because we have 27, we got a bunch of armies of man that have black powder weapons and knights, right? Like they're very similar. Yeah, you could argue that maybe there's some slight differences, but like at the end of the day, their core is the same.
Yeah, and I also think that, yeah, and I mean, I also, this is kind of off topic, but that's why I also wouldn't mind seeing, like, could be on the generous side, but unit limits. So no more than 5 of something, say, because I think it allows you to be that little bit more creative. And we have the power as TOs to do that now, right? But you've got to be a bit ballsy to do it. I think it would allow them to say, all right, well, this unit seems fine as long as the person's only taking 4 or 5 of them, right? So you can, again, you could potentially be a little more flavorful.
Yeah. Tom Annis mentions the trick is lowering the number of armies while keeping the same options in different form. So nobody's models are invalidated. 100%, right? And, you know, he's like, you know, doesn't see that as a good strategy for growth. But the reality is sometimes you have to prune the rose bush to make it bloom, right? You know, from time to time, that's, you know, you cut it a little bit to make it, you know, to make it plentiful. So circling back, you know, how would you, if you wanted to consolidate, how would you do it? Well, one is, or you wanted to get rid of some armies. One I already mentioned, you just stop herd army. You just ignore them. They want to play the herd army. It's the same army it's like 3 years ago. It's in that book, and you just stop publishing the list, right? That's one option. Another one is obviously consolidate, right? We've talked a couple options. You know, maybe you consolidate League of Rordia and Kingdoms of Men together. Maybe you throw Basilia in there. I don't know. Maybe you put the 2 orcs together, right? You know, consolidation is a viable thing. And then I think the third one, which is probably the least attractive, is you literally just you announce that you're cutting an army. You know, I think that's a strategy. There's no way they use that strategy. I mean, unless they can tell you, hey, this list is no longer the way it was, but it's here now. If you want to play this type of army, it's in this Genesis.
Well, when you do that, if you were to do that, you get bad press twice, right?
Yeah.
You get it when you announce it, and then you get it when you do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the smart money is you just don't say anything, and you just hey, herd army. Oh man, we really haven't updated that in 3 years. Oh, it's like the historical book is a classic example. How many times do we get asked, when are you going to update the historical book? They don't ever say never. But let's be honest, they're never going to do that. They're never going to go back in and update that ever. But they leave it open. Like it's maybe someday. Yeah.
What do you think about that last comment? I can't see who it's from.
This one here?
Yeah. I mean, a different way of doing theme lists would be to have unit upgrades instead. To fit a theme, I guess.
So, like for example, if you had an elf master elf list, you could have Gladestalkers, and there could be 3 different upgrades to make it the Twilightkin version, the Sylvankin version, or the regular elf version, right?
But if we're looking at that, so what do we got now? We've got 27 armies.
27 armies.
So let's go with, first of all, like your first suggestion is one way to do is you can nuke the army, right? Are there any armies out of the 27 you would
Reckon slaves. I mean,
100%?
and there's literally anybody. I mean, yeah, I of course people play it, but I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't seen it in a
there
tournament.
there's 3 people somewhere. There's 3 people somewhere that play slaves.
Yeah.
Are there any others that you'd actually nuke? I personally believe that combination is the better strategy.
Yeah.
Combining.
Agreed.
But
I mean, I actually thought about nuking maybe the regular orc army, but that's dumb. Just work it into the they already have some of the units with Britforge orcs combined. Just make one big orc list, right? That's what I would do.
Let me I'll just bring up Easy Army in the background.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously you got like dwarves, right? You got Imperial dwarves and free dwarves. Those, you could argue that even though one's a well, they're very similar, right? Except for a few units that they can't take. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would combine those. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I guess they already are in the sense they're master and theme, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, the free dwarves essentially spouted from a bunch of units. Some of the units had not made it back into the book for 3rd edition. And so I think that's how they spout. I'd honestly nuke the free dwarves. I don't think they had a lot.
Chuck mentions that orcs and rifts play different. 100% agree. And I wonder. Let me just throw this out there. Is it possible that orcs play just like ogres or another army, and it's not just about consolidating lists or eliminating lists. It's about eliminating, 3 or 4 armies that have the exact same play style. You can call their army, you can call their units different names, but at the end of the day, they go about playing the game in the same way. And I think, so
don't you hate when you move to another device and you forget all your passwords?
Oh yeah. Well, Paige brings up, and I mentioned this earlier. We got 27. We got 20 armies. Age of Sigmar only has 24. So, that's a real question. Then, what's the right number? Maybe what's the right number, Matt?
Well, and if you look at Age of Sigmar, though, they are all quite specialized, which comes back to your point on things playing the same. We don't have that. And I think the 24 being quite specialized is what inherently leads that being to an unbalanced game.
Right. It's hard to balance that many moving pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking through here some more points, I mean, he's commenting, I'd rather see him keep all the armies and build them around for a long time. The reality is, let's be honest, it's a business. They have no interest. I'm speculating here. It's just me. I don't have any inside knowledge here. I'm not inside baseball. But if I ran a business, I wouldn't give 2 shits about a herd army. If I'm not making the models for it, I don't really, my instinct is either to just ignore it or throw that army into forces of nature. Right. And, so
if we came back to the nuking strategy, I reckon I would nuke, in terms of complete nuke and not combine, I would nuke Ratkin slaves. I would nuke the free dwarfs, because and the reason you could argue that that's a combination with Imperial, but all their units came from Imperial to start with.
Yeah.
And I would consider nuking herd.
Another thing I just thought about. What is there? Is it potential we're going to see them nuke units? I know they nuked the Stampede and they gave us the miniature chariots, but let's be honest, they're not the same, really.
And then they gave us Stampede.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So, would you nuke any others?
Well, I mean, who did you did Rat Kid Slaves and Free Dwarves? Is that what you said? I honestly do. There's too many generic men lists. I would probably nuke League of Rhodia, but I wouldn't nuke them. I would just combine them with Kingdoms of Men and have.
So we'll come
because like the differences between the units are not great, right? Like There's some stuff in Kingdoms of Men that are not in vice versa, but just put it all in one list.
All right. So if we were going to combine, I think the easiest one to combine is that even though they're different play styles, they're Reforge Conquer the Orcs in the. I think you do that in the fluff, and then
yeah. Go ahead.
And then they're combined.
It's interesting. You sort of triggered something in my brain, which is, with the Brotherhood, they actually went the other way, right? They had a Brotherhood army, they killed them, but then when they respawned, they became 2. So, I don't know.
Do you
like,
know what? I just have this feeling that it could have been because of pushback afterwards, that they felt like they still had to give people something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Basilia has to stay alone.
Well, he brings up a good point, right? And I think one thing we should point out is there's no way they combine armies that they make models for with armies that they do not make models for. So why, if Basilean is a Mantic IP army, there's no way you combine that with Kingdoms of Men, right? Now, you mentioned Herd and Force of Nature. Well, they technically make werewolves. So
and centaurs.
Yeah. So there is some of that already there, right?
Yeah, that's true. So what I would do with men is I would go Brother Mark back into Basilia. Yep. I would go Brother Mark back into Basilia. I would go Green Lady goes back into nature. And maybe Herd into nature. And then I would combine Lega Raudia and Kingdoms of Men.
Interesting.
What do you think of those?
You're hardcore, man. You're hardcore, man. And
what do you think of those as combos, though?
I think it'd be fine. I think ultimately, as long as the army or the units that people are playing can still be played in close approximation, So Chuck, so here's an interesting thing, that another comment that Chuck, thanks for keeping these coming. He's triggering something to me. Maybe we're going to see that they don't kill an army or nuke it. They completely change it. What if Herd became some kind of Native American list? Maybe, that's certainly a possibility.
It's a British game, mate. Come on.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. They're not. It's around the Mediterranean. They're not. Yeah.
It'll be a 3-unit list if it's British, and they just get to boss every other.
But to your point, though, I could also see a knight army. Like if you wanted to play, whether it's Brother Mark or Green Lady, like you could make one army that had. Now, I guess the argument would be the field between the two armies is vastly different. What you can do with those units, but again, you said you could have upgrades. Maybe one thing we didn't touch on though is we talked about balance, but what are some of the other benefits of why would a company cull some of the units or some of the armies besides balance?
Besides balance, well, and from making their own models. Like I think Mantic, to survive, you can't survive off selling a few books every year. Right?
No. Yeah.
You just can't. You can't do that. So I think what they need to do is to be able to, at the very least, even if they don't go away from model agnostic, they basically need to be able to provide models for everything in the future, to give you this idea that, all right, I want to play this army, I can choose to support the company or use my own models. You have to be put in that place. I don't think they'll go away from as agnostic as you know what I'm trying to say.
They're going to continue to say play with the models you have, right? Because they throw it that horse is already out of the barn. But you could say one thing, and you could do something else, right? And do something else means, to what we got here, solidify their IP by really focusing in on the armies they make models for.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what we see now in the main rule book, right? We mainly get the armies that they do things for, and then the lists elsewise. Dan, who you just put up then, also made a good point further up that I agree with. I would roll Sylvan back into elves, but I'd keep Twilight King separate.
Because of the nature that is so different.
Yeah, and it's built on their Night Stalker line too, the Twilight King. So I think it makes sense to keep those. But I think you could find a way to give enough flavour and build a Sylvan style list within Elf anyway.
Yeah. And like we said before, this is all just BSing. We're just shooting the breeze here. Like, we don't have any inside pool baseball.
I've actually been appointed secret CEO of Men.
Okay. Well, the reality though is that, I'm almost 50 years old. I have been playing war games for a long time. And every single game that has come and gone, that has had more than one edition, this is something you have to deal with, right? Like, at the very least, your army changes, and sometimes changes to a point where it doesn't look like the same army or doesn't play like the same army. Because, one of the, like in GW's mind, one of the ways you kind of reset things is you kill stuff off or you change it so drastically, it's a brand new army at that point. Right. And they kind of do that with orcs, right? Like, they have all these new cruel boys and they play completely differently than, they still have the old orcs, but they, from what I understand, they're not as effective as some of the newer stuff.
No. Yeah, that's true. I've, based on my list, I've already culled us 8. I've already got us back 8 armies, Rob. We're now back.
Yeah, I know. You're like, you're the hatchet man. Ronnie needs to get you in that room,
But I think 20 is a good number. And Scott makes a great point. And I think they've been moving in that direction. They realize that now, right? They can no longer be the alternative cheap provider for other games.
They're not. And let's be honest, they're not cheap. Like, they used to be the value position, right? Like, they were like, you get lots of hard plastic for a reasonable amount of money. Like, if you look at the cost of the resin stuff, man, it's not cheap. But that being said, I think there's still, the quality level of the new resins, I think, warrant some of the cost. But they're not cheap by any stretch of the imaginations. So Matthew Curtis just said, "Hey, great topic." Yeah, it's one of these things where it's one of those ones that people hate talking about, because I remember, like, I've been through it before. We're like, God dang, my army is, what's worse is if they don't give you an alternative. If, like, you literally have like a bunch of wood elf chariots and, well, yeah, the end times is a little bit different. Yeah, but I see the point here. Invalidating armies as soon after playtesting and publishing this past Clash of Kings. We're not saying, and by the way, we're not saying this is going to happen tomorrow.
We're not saying next Clash of Kings.
No. I would say, yeah. I think, well, and he was bringing up, that's what I'm saying. It's not a 3rd edition thing. It's probably a 4th or a 5th edition thing. Because at some point,
why would you do it? Well, it's about evolution,
right? What's their motivation too would be shelf space, right?
Shelf space.
They wouldn't have to print, or you would have less army lists to print in the book, right? If you think about it, they've got a whole book dedicated to the armies they don't make. Look, it's not 5th edition might roll around, and maybe that Uncharted Empires book just doesn't happen anymore. That would not shock me in the least.
It's totally about, if you want to play this army, we provide it. And being able to reasonably, like, if they stay at 28 armies, there is no way they're going to get anywhere near that in the next decade. Like, being able to provide it.
I like the comment. So let's look at it. And we've talked about this on the show a few times, Tim, that the way that the two companies are actually operating their business is completely different. Mantic, GW is and this past Adepticon is a prime example where you had 2 Harlequin armies on the top table for 40K. What book just came out?
Harlequins.
Yeah. Well, the elves, space elves.
Yeah.
I'm farting. I don't play 40Ks regularly enough, but, like, obviously that it's not lost on me that the brand new book is what's at the top table, right? Whereas, Mantic, their style is a little bit different where they're going to give you a bunch of armies and then every year we're going to update them. But even with all that, at some point, and I would say the third edition did a really good job of kind of giving us a little shot in the arm and kind of invigorating us. But, really want to invigorate some stuff, they've added 2 armies. And here's the thing, another, going back to Felix's point, why would they call armies? At some point, Matthew Gilbert's going to get his wish to have an amphibian army at some point, right? Like there are other armies that have been mentioned since first edition that at some point they're going to want to make those Mantic armies. And I think that you would be hard pressed to find room if you already have the 27 armies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why did they make like for example, he's bringing up a good point. Why did they add Riftforged Orcs and Halflings? For the Halflings, I think they saw a market opportunity to put out some really great plastic Halflings. Look, let's be honest. I've got a Westphalia Halfling army. It's cool, but they're expensive. They're a little bit, it's resin. Some people don't like working with resin. You got the War Games Atlantic stuff, which are total shit. You got the integrated base. Well, look, anybody that's got the integrated base, you lost me at that point because I'm not going to be clipping that off, right? So, I think they saw an opportunity to make a really cool Halfling army. Riftforged Orcs is the one that made me scratch my head a little bit because I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
My thought on that is I think what we're seeing is we've seen it in men with Basalia. We've seen it, and now seeing it with orcs. We haven't seen it with elves yet, but they're trying to, not unlike GW, trying to put their own spin on a trope, right?
Yeah.
So I think what they want to see is all right, we're going to create a product, and this is all speculation. We're going to create a product for orcs where if we put out good enough models, you will want to put our models because they fit the fluff, right? You can't, like a generic orc won't fit it so well.
Right? I wonder if we should be looking at the orc specifically as an indicator of what they're going to do. So, let's just play that out. If they just consolidate the orcs into the Riftforge, then what they're looking at is they're looking at ways to eliminate generic IP armies, right? And they're trying to put their own spin on it. And I think Chuck made the point that Riftforged Orcs plays a lot different than the regular orcs. And I'm not an orc player. I have an orc army, but I'm not an orc player. But I can see what they're saying in the sense that the regular orcs, they've got the Morax and the chariots and they're in your face, whereas the other ones got, well, don't they do the same thing? I don't know. I thought they both want to smash you up, right? But they probably do it in different ways. Because the orcs do they have trolls? But like the Riftforge has the new Cyclops guys, right?
Yes, yeah, they have whatever they're called.
So this is an interesting comment too that I think is interesting. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that as we give them money, as we buy their models from them, as their quality increases, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The models just get better and better and better and better and better. So, I agree. I think now I would like to see them more plastics. It's going to be interesting to see. They've got the Empire Dust coming up this year. So that's another one that's really interesting to me because that's not a Mantic IP. That's still very Tomb Kings-ish, right? So yeah, and like this person mentions, let's see who did Ophidia. I would love to have an Ophidia, basically a good undead army, not just by taking Jarvis. Be awesome. I don't know. What says you? I mean, what do you guys say? I mean, maybe we need to put a poll on the webpage and just say, how many people think that. Two questions. One would be, how many people think we need to have consolidation? And then the second one is, how many people think we will have consolidation, right? Because those are two different things, right? I wrote an article like a million years ago about just, every little thing that you do, every little option that you give, it affects the balance. It's just one more toggle that they've got to figure out, right?
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, and I think this is the point, right? This is part of the point. Is
well,
yeah.
that's right.
So honestly, if I was Mantic, I wouldn't. If I wanted to trial this idea, I wouldn't dick around. I'd write the fluff for it and get it in one of the upcoming books or two and make it happen. Have Riftforge conquer the orcs and just see how it goes. I mean,
Right.
the reality is for them to bring out Riftforge orcs mustn't be a top selling line for them. I mean, I have no idea of their sales data, but it mustn't be. Otherwise, you wouldn't bring out a competing list.
Yeah, that was the one that made me scratch the head the most because, I mean, like, you already have a very active orc fan base. The list is good. People were winning tournaments with it, and
You
then,
reckon? Like, how many orc players do you know?
well, I mean, Eric, well,
Yeah.
I have orc. I mean, there's a lot locally, a lot, like 5 orc
Yeah?
players locally. Yeah, we
Okay.
have a lot of orc players because it was one of the few armies where you could just like build a really nasty, I don't want to call it alpha strike because it wasn't quite that fast, but you could just run across the table and whatever gets over there, just smash face. Yeah. So we got a couple more comments. Obviously more armies, harder to balance, but but also, Baskin Robbins here in the U.S., 31 flavors, right? Like, you also have to have enough flavors for people to find their army that either aesthetically they enjoy or the play style they enjoy. But 31 is probably too much. Maybe 20 is the right answer. Maybe 22.
Yeah, and that's why I think if you actually have 20, you potentially can provide more flavor, right? You can get, because of the balancing issue, you can get more interesting in your rules design, and then go, all right, we're going to put something wild in here. Let's test that against 20 options instead of 27.
So, and Thompson here, or Zane is what he's put his list on, is interesting because Thompson, he's not he's a Kings War player on the side. He is an AOS player, right? And and so a lot of my AOS information about broke ass armies, what's the new hotness, comes from him. So and Tim makes his comment. Look, I don't think we should follow the GW approach in the sense that we're back to army books. We don't want that.
No.
But I do think there is room for consolidation, so that you don't have to have a book.
Yeah,
Well,
100%.
you don't have to have 27 armies, right? You could have
GW
20.
is a very specific approach of release something new that's better to make you buy it. We're not talking about releasing something new that's better. We're talking about consolidating and not making one army better than the other by any stretch.
I'll give them credit too. I think other than one time when we had an update and they made the Steel Behemoth a little too good, and Alex Chavez was able to capitalize that for a U.S. Master run, that's like the only time that I can literally see that they came out with a new model and like the rules kind of like, okay, I was like wondering like, okay, what are we doing here?
I know we went from no Steel Behemoth in lists to like 4.
So Neil Barton's bringing up a point. Team Queensland, 26 players for BlizzCon. That's amazing. Second biggest Oz event for 2022. That's fantastic. Now, you're in Canberra, right? So where is BlizzCon at compared to you?
About 2,000 kilometers north.
Okay, a long ways away. That's awesome though. Congratulations, 26 players. I firmly believe the sweet spot is 20 to 30 players for an event is. Well,
no, I said the Reforge orcs should conquer them. So basically, you would still have the existing models.
You could,
of
yeah,
orcs,
you could, because you would have the units in
league.
there. Like if you want to take fight wagons, you could still take fight wagons.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, because essentially they've given the vast majority. Well, not the vast majority, but they've given a fair few orc options to the Riftforge orc. So it wouldn't be too big a step to just take that one step further.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a topic that people get very passionate about because, like you, I have lots of armies sitting in boxes that either the game has been killed or the army has been invalidated. So over the years, it's just like it sucks. I firmly believe it sucks. And so definitely whatever they do, I just hope that they give people an alternative use for those. Yeah, and we got 70 coming up for Lone Wolf, so that's pretty awesome. I was a late edition. So long story short, everybody knows I smashed up my wife's van onto a last tournament, and then it's $3,500. It has to be in the freaking. It has to be at the body shop for like a week. So I'm like, I can't leave my wife stranded. So it was going to overlap Lone Wolf, but fortunately things got moved around. So.
Oh, nice.
So now I can go.
Yeah. And we've got a comment from JPFJ here, who's one of the Goonhammer guys. Yeah, and I agree. You've got to be careful because if you lose units, it is difficult. You know, you don't. If you lose a unit, there needs to be almost something directly you can use it for instead, right? But you do want to see change.
What about? I'm gonna throw a crazy idea out there. And you can tell me I'm a crazy person. But, we do have Clash of Kings. And in the past, we have made changes to scenarios, almost like on a seasonal basis. What if, and they do it with artifacts, right? What if, like, for the Ogre list in the next Clash of Kings, they just said, the hunters have all got infected with some kind of crazy disease taking over the world, and it killed off all the hunters. And the hunters aren't in the list for a season. I wonder, like, is that a viable? Probably not, but I don't know. To have like seasonal changes to an army list. I mean, you could argue that they've done that in the sense that, like, we used to have, like, we at one point we had special upgraded Berserker Brave unit, which was in the Clash of Kings book, but then that's no longer around. Those are gone. So that was like a one-time thing. And while that book was in effect, we had this special unit. So I mean, you could argue they've done it where they've brought in stuff only to remove them, but you already had the generic version of that. Yeah. So Haggis, about like CCGs, yeah. They yeah. I don't know. I don't know though. I guess that the negative there is that it takes a hell of a lot longer than to paint those units than to paint those units and buy the cards.
And I actually don't think Mantic would have the resources to keep up with it.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm just trying to think. Is there any company that does that? I don't think there's any companies that do that. Let me look at the notes here. See what else we got here. We got a lot of great comments. Appreciate everybody's comments.
There's a comment on the one I did in Fanatics who said basically just AOS it that you do three or four factions and then everything's a sub from that.
Oh, that's a good point. Where you got like Age of Destruction,
the Order, Savage, Nature. I think they've written.
Well, here's the question: how could we change the fact that we've got this stupid? A lot of people don't like it. I'm kind of like evil, good, neutral alignment kind of thing. Could that be changed in a way to affect army lists?
Oh, there you go. Adrian said Privateer Press had seasonal units.
Interesting. I've actually not played War Machine since like the first edition, so that's cool to know that has been tried out.
Sorry, what was your question?
What was my question? I'm getting old. Oh man, you're killing me here, man. You're absolutely killing me. Oh, we were talking about like can we change or the good evil neutral alignment system? Could that be changed in a way, to all right?
Well, again, I think like we talked about last time, where I suggested the Lord of the Rings way was the best way I've ever seen that done in terms of alignment for the Lord of the Rings game. I mean, you basically use that to support the fluff.
So Scott's kind of got a point here that it's triggered me a little bit. What if you took some of these units that are like super, they're in like every list, right? What if you had like a generic allies list? I don't know, I'm just thinking like Gladestalkers could be that unit, right? Like,
yeah, and this is an interesting point here from whoever Facebook user is.
This one right here, I'm assuming. Let's see.
Oh, did I just take it off? Sorry,
Oh,
we both
oh,
keep
we're
clicking.
both yeah.
But so the thing I think about that, the difference is yes, but they're also producing all the models for it every time.
So the other distinction, and I've had this conversation with many people, like we were dealing with a game like Malifaux or Infinity, it is a skirmish game. It is possible for you to buy the entire range, and there are people that have and do. Typically with ranks and flanks, where you have a 100, 200 model count army, you're not going to buy you're not going to buy all the armies. I mean, it's interesting because you could argue that, how would condensing the army list attract a bigger market share of players? Well, it makes the game better, right? I guess is the best way. It makes the game more balanced. It makes the game better. It makes it more playable. You have to do it in a way that you're not invalidating play styles or people's existing armies, but there's ways to do it. And also, at the end of the day, this might sound a little bit too much like GW, but like change is exciting. Like sometimes change for just change purposes is okay. Like, I don't know about you, but like before that Clash of Kings book came out, I was like, man, I'm getting bored. I was like, I need some new stuff. I need some new toys to play with. So,
yeah, I think probably, I mean, I'd argue that the change with Clash of Kings was a bit more dramatic even than the change to third.
Yeah, and Thompson here, he brings up, Infinity, yeah, they have killed off armies and they've killed off models, and they've killed off lots of stuff. I will say they have a different business model in the sense that, at least locally, they have a very strong fan base that very much will support that game. Even if you could buy an alternative model locally, I and regionally, we don't see that. Like, you play with the Infinity models 100%.
What do you think about unit caps?
You mean like if you said you can only take 5 hordes of siege breakers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, that would eliminate some of the skew list, right? Well, I mean,
some.
Will it?
And it depends how generous you were, whether you made it 4 or 5. I think 3 is too low.
But I think you bring up a good argument. Like, one of the arguments is like, hey, by reducing the amount of lists that you have, you can balance the army, but you can really make the armies unique, right?
Correct.
Well,
That's what I believe.
The same flavor is the same thing is you could say if you had unit caps or any other unique way to build the army, if you change that a little bit, that also would have a big impact on play, right? Like it would drastically change the armies you see on the table. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know, like I think 3 would be too low. And obviously, it's difficult to say what's the right number. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and you wouldn't, or another way to do it is you could have it's starting to sound too GW, but when you introduce a new unit, like a special unit, you make that 0 to 3. So you're not killing anyone's list, right? You make the new stuff you bring into game limited.
So, brings up a good point, just saying that, it does take all that out. The reality is, though, when you have 27 armies, that's 27 armies. You got to do that every single time there's a change. You've got to like balance it out. And if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, if you just cut an army, there's very little work. If you just cut an army, it's no longer available in easy army.
And I don't know if I buy the disingenuous argument. Like 10 years down the track, it's no longer got to do with transition, right?
Well, that's true too.
While it suited them to draw us players in, they also did us a favor, right? Of being able to play that game. I don't really think, I really don't think that, it would be that disingenuous because, I mean, the reality is it's been a long time. They need to make. They need to do
I think
makes sense for them.
Well, to your point, I think that anybody that thinks that a company is going to stick with their approach or their rules for indefinitely, never changing, anything. I think they came into this game saying, "Hey, we want to support your armies that you already have," and I don't see them I've already said that. I don't see them publicly stating anything different. But in their actions, if they stop, I'm air quoting supporting, but like if they put less effort into the army lists that are not support. I mean, a good example is Vanguard, right? Like Vanguard has a bunch of armies that they don't make models for. And they literally just made some lists. And then that was it. Like they're the same list they've had forever. And I don't see them getting updated. And it does persuade people to play different armies. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what Felix has said here in that, we've got the rule already. It's just that they never show, we never get anything that's other than a
but
1.
You could say like Ogre Siegebreakers 3, right? You could do that, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, anybody of my age has got lots of issues where, take your pick, Slayer armies, Wood Elf chariots. I've got lots and lots and lots of various. I mean, if I look at my GW stuff, one thing that's also important probably to think about too is that at one point they never really said, hey, we're making an army. Let's just take Skaven. They didn't say they're going to give you a Skaven army in Kings of War. They said we're going to give you an army that'll make use of 80% of your models, right? And there is that distinction because there's lots of units in the old Skaven army that don't exist in this Rakin list, and I think that's going to continue as well, right? So,
yeah, correct. Like for example, if you nuke Ratkin slaves, like I suggested, there's still an army to use your rats. You if you nuke one of the human variants, there's still human armies to use your humans.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see what else we got on the live stream here. Let's see. We're coming up the time.
Whoever it is, only wants Siege Breakers to be 2. Rob.
Well, I won't agree. I won't disagree with you that they're very effective. I think the problem with the list is not that they're not limited. The problem with the list is that economically,
so much better.
They're just 40 more points gives you defense 6 and an extra pip of crushing, without the old reduction to the loss in speed. Right? They used to be speed 5, right? And actually, at one time they were even crushing 2 Thunder 1 or something like that, but they were slow. So you kind of, Well, this was an interesting conversation. It's not one that we can obviously. Neil mentioned that they do have a Dead Zone campaign coming up. I think it's not this month; it's the next month. So good luck to them. It should be a lot of fun.
I actually, well, I mean, I don't think they should go back on it. I like the simplicity of army building at the moment, but I certainly think a style like Warhammer used, it was not a bad style. It got broken by the fact that they kept bringing out more and more units that were overpowered. Right? Yeah. Like I wouldn't mind some sort of move to the old core tax.
Yeah.
But at this point, that would probably have more chance of invalidating armies, so I don't think would work. So I don't think they can move away from what they're doing, but they could do using the the n equals however many a little bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think whatever they do, that they've got to tread lightly, right? They don't want to piss off everybody at once, but at the same token, they do have to be on the outlook for at some point, like I said, Ophidians, they're going to want to do Ophidians, right? And I don't see them doing Ophidians until they've brought in some of the reined in some of the the other armies. Here's a crazy idea. What if they had a poll and the bottom 2 armies, everybody gets a vote, and the bottom 2 armies are the ones that get called? I don't know. I've never seen that before, but at least it's kind of like Monopoly when they wanted to see which of the pawn pieces were going to make it into the new version of the game. They had a poll, and maybe something like that. I don't know. Maybe that's too crazy. Maybe that's too Hunger Games for them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the more we've talked about it, like your idea is basically they could just, if there's armies that they don't want to support anymore, they could just never change the list.
Leave it alone.
Leave it
And
alone.
it's that list, and if the meta shifts away and that kind of gets left behind,
People
at
will
that
stop
point,
playing it.
the people will stop playing it. And ultimately, you know, yeah, I don't know if that's a better way to do it. You know, it's sort of like the
Yeah.
Band-Aid. Do you just want to rip the Band-Aid off, or do you want to
Yeah,
like
I
leave the
kind of
Band-Aid?
feel like it. Yeah, going back to the disingenuous thing, I think that almost would be like that's almost like not saying what you're doing. Where at least
Yeah.
with if you combine armies, yeah.
So you know, why we talked a little bit earlier why they would call armies. One is obviously to make the game more balanceable, right? You'll have less armies to toggle on and off, but also more shelf space. You know, the less armies they've got, the less shelf space they've got to have at the store. The less armies they've got to support. You know, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to money, right? In a small company, and if they have to spend, and I don't know, you know more than I do. You know, how long does it take to balance an army for Clash of Kings? You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
Well, you got to do it 27 times.
Yeah, and the
against
thing
26 other armies.
It all comes down to how many changes you want to make at once too. So, for example, the last Clash of Kings, I think some things have snuck through because it was so big. You know, we essentially missed a year, so we had 2 years in one. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just interesting. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to cull, but
yeah, we've talked about that one, Felix. I mean, that's obviously, you know,
definitely rack and slaves.
Rack and slaves. If one army has to go, it's got to be that army, right?
Yep.
I don't know anybody that's played it that hasn't played it as a joke. Now, before we get out of here, maybe another little segue here that we didn't really touch on. Maybe we can talk about next week. We've been talking about it. Obviously, we're tournament players, right? We're tournament players. Does it, you know, I've said before, in the garage, it doesn't really matter if an army's balanced or not, right? Like asymmetric play, whatever, they're not in it to win it, right? They're in it just to have a fun time. So I don't know. We're going with this, do they end up making a book for the armies that have been called from the tournament list? Like, here's your tournament armies, and then here's this book of other armies that are no longer competitive.
I think you just leave it behind, because I think what we're talking about is like they would still have other options. So those people write their own fluff, right? There would be, yeah.
And I think there's a potential to like using more of the main and theme lists. You can do some consolidation that way, right? Certainly, we talked about some.
Yeah.
Well, oh man, we're at time. Thanks for everybody that joined us tonight. 27 is a good number.
Yeah.
I don't know that we had this many before. I guess it's that controversial topic. And as always, we didn't actually solve anything. We didn't answer anything. We didn't really come to any conclusion other than everybody would be angry if they called their favorite army. But I literally do think we should be preparing for that inevitability in 4th edition. I just don't. Let me ask it another way. What other game system? I mean, here's all I'll ask it. If AOS, which has got all the resources in the world, only have 24 armies, how do we think a company with 27 employees, right, can maintain 27 armies? You know, I guess the argument is if you don't actually intend to ever make all the models, then I guess it is doable. But to your point, they're a model company first, a rules company second, right? That's the models where they make their money. The rules are, they're not. I mean, they do make money off the rules, but that's not their primary source of revenue. So, final comments from you?
No. I think we've had a good
flog that horse.
Yeah. Might have to do it again sometime as it gets closer. Yeah, but maybe we should do a couple of polls in the countercharge page.
Yeah, it'd be funny. I'm gonna let you post them up. That'd be pretty funny to see. Like, do we think we're gonna see some army consolidation? Do we think it's a good idea? And if so, what armies do we think would be prime candidates for consolidation? I just, I don't know. It's interesting. Tim brought up one last point. And that's something I'm always conscious of, is that it's not always about the tournament play, right? Like, I would like to see Well, sure, but you're talking about apples and oranges, right? The DBA company is 2 people, 3 people. So the people that make the army book. I mean, obviously they have playtesters. And well, I'm assuming you probably can buy it if you go to the right store, but none of the stores here would stock that. But I just wonder, like,
what other game company cares what we think was Chuck's previous
oh,
one.
okay. Well, let me post that one. I'm sorry, you put it up there already.
Mm.
I mean, not many, right? GW
Mm.
just does what they're gonna do. I think Infinity. I think those guys do a pretty good job of taking the pulse, but they still do what they want to do, right? Like at the end of the day, it's their IP and they're still going to do it. But I think they take a pulse, and I think Mantic does a good job too. I mean, I wasn't in the room, but when they killed off the Brotherhood, there was a lot of gasps, right? Like, what does it mean, right? And so and they came back out relatively quickly and said, well, it means the original answer was that we weren't going to see like full armies. We were going to see like ragtag refugees of sorts that have found their ways to other armies, and which the fact that they have a complete theme list, like I don't know that you can make the argument that is there that many knights left for the Brother Mark? I don't know. Thought they all went into the pit. So unless they had life jackets on, I don't know. Well, we have flogged this as far as we can flog it tonight, I think. But we really appreciate all you got, whether you agree with us or not. I love the fact that the Countercharge audience is very they're in there to mix it up and to have that healthy discussion, but we do it respectfully. And I just thanks for everybody, and look for Matt to put some polls up. It'll be always super interesting to see what you guys have to say.
Everybody's right. Everybody's right, of course.
Well, right, but I mean, I know what they're gonna say. Like, don't. I think most people would say, like, do it in a way we don't invalidate models, right?
Yeah.
Or units, and I get that. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, well, let's leave it there for tonight. Until next time, keep countercharging.